Good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you might be. My name is Kevin Michael Grace, and this is the KMG show for a Tuesday, August the 24th, 2021. Let's see what's going on here with this stream. I seem to have started a second one. And just give me a sec here. I just hate this new YouTube interface. Absolutely hate it with a passion. But I guess I'm stuck with it. No, let's go to this. Come on. Okay, well, there's only one showing. So let's go to it then. Oh, there we go. Little Copcasso 88 and Dan. So big things happening in the last few days. Big things happening in my neighborhood. Absolutely infuriating big things. We'll start with a story from American Greatness by Deborah Heine. The Food and Drug Administration announced Monday that it's granted full approval to Pfizer and BioNTech for their COVID-19 vaccine to be given to Americans as young as 16, even though several safety and efficacy studies will not be completed for years. The approval appears to only cover the first two doses of the vaccine, with subsequent boosters covered by the emergency use authorization. So Joe Biden was talking a couple of weeks ago about full authorization for the first two jabs, and my word, that came through in a hurry, didn't it? Not like there was any coercion or arm twisting involved, was there? Now, the third jab. So the government says that this is just too funny and too infuriating at the same time. The third jab is for those with immunodeficiency problems. And originally I thought, oh, I see. People who are suffering from underlying conditions. And then I realized, no, the immunodeficiency is because the efficacy of the vaccine is failing. And there's been no studies issued to justify this third booster. And guess what? You go to Twitter and other places in social media, and you have to listen to the health advice issued by the World Health Organization and local authorities. Okay, here's a story from the Voice of America. The head of the World Health Organization urged countries to delay administering booster shots by at least 2 months to allow nations with low vaccine doses to receive more. But no, they're going ahead. They're going ahead right now. And I think that we're going to see a switcheroo here that fully vaccinated. Oh, no, fully vaccinated people are not having breakthrough cases. Why is that? Well, because you need 3 jabs now to be fully vaccinated. Let's see. The vaccine also continues to be available under emergency use authorization, including for individuals 12 to 15 years of age, and for the administration of a third dose in certain immunocompromised individuals. The Pfizer vaccine, now called Comirnaty, is the first COVID-19 vaccine to receive FDA approval. Health officials are hoping the rushed authorization of the vaccine will encourage more unvaccinated people to get the jab. I'm hopeful this approval will help increase confidence in our vaccine, Pfizer CEO Albert Bourla said in a statement. Vaccination remains the best tool we have to protect lives. In a statement from the White House, Joe Biden stayed on message, telling vaccine skeptics, it's time for you to get your vaccination and get it today. And he's already begun bullying every company, every private company in America. He does not have the authority to force private companies to institute vaccine mandates, but he's going ahead anyway. The FDA said in a statement that based on results from the clinical trial, the vaccine was 91% effective in preventing COVID-19 disease. When? When was it 91% effective? Because those are not the numbers that we're seeing now. There was no mention in the FDA statement of how many boosters might be required after the vaccine's effectiveness wears off. So how about side effects? The final results of another study evaluating the occurrence of myocarditis and pericarditis following administration of the vaccine is due on September the 30th, 2024. Why, that's 3 years from now. A natural history study of myocarditis and pericarditis following administration of Comirnaty is also due on September 30th, 2024. A prospective cohort study with at least 5 years of follow-up for potential long-term sequelae of myocarditis after vaccination is not expected to be completed until December the 31st, 2026. 2 more studies measure the incidence of subclinical myocarditis following administration of the second dose of Comirnaty in children and young adults. Results of those studies are not due until May the 31st, 2024 and December the 31st, 2022, respectively. Okay. As of July the 16th, 2021, approximately 8.9 million U.S. adolescents aged 12 to 17 had received the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine. As of July the 16th, there were 9,246 adverse events in U.S. adolescents aged 12 to 17. That's just in adolescents, reported in the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System, VAERS, after receipt of Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine. According to some medical experts, VAERS greatly undercounts the incidence of adverse events. New analysis from the Journal of the American Medical Association found a rate of 1.8 cases per 1,000 people for pericarditis and 1 in 100,000 for myocarditis. That's a combined rate that's more than 5 times higher than thought. 2.8 people per 100,000 rather than 1/2 per 100,000. Although no COVID vaccines have been authorized for use in children under 12, approvals are expected later this year or fall. Okay, yes. Again, no coercion or arm twisting involved here at all. Well, this is all very good news for Big Pharma. It's a story on Zero Hedge by Portfolio Armor, who I believe is our friend David Pinson. FDA approval greases skids for booster shots. In our Corona Doom 2.0 post earlier this month, we wrote that the government would use the threat of renewed lockdowns to push the unvaccinated to get vaccines, and that would benefit one of our recent top names, BioNTech, the vaccine maker that partnered with Pfizer. In our follow-up last week, we wrote that the prospect of booster shots would give BioNTech and another recent top name of ours, Moderna, an added boost. Yeah, it's certainly good for the drug companies. Oh, I didn't see this previously. Canada commits to buying 1 Pfizer booster per year for all citizens through 2023. Retains option to buy second booster for each citizen in each year and up to 2 booster doses in 2024. As always, Canada leading the way. And here is an article from Alex Berenson's Substack. It's called, quite frankly, The Arrogance of Anthony Fauci and What It Means for the Rest of Us. Dr. Anthony Fauci has had himself a year or two. As 2020 began, he was a senior federal bureaucrat best known for helping defang the AIDS crisis. This infuriates me when I see this because Anthony Fauci's intervention in AIDS was disastrous. He was a ceaseless cheerleader for AZT, the single most poisonous drug ever approved in America. And he wanted to give it to pretty much everyone, even people who had HIV and weren't showing any symptoms of AIDS. And he kept insisting that AIDS was everyone's disease when it was known pretty much right from the very beginning that it was not everyone's disease. A week before, Fauci had turned 79, well past the standard retirement age for government employees, I'll say, though he controlled a multi-billion-dollar research budget and no one was publicly suggesting he stepped down. The novel coronavirus changed everything for him. Within months, practically every American knew his name. People worldwide viewed him as their best hope to defeat COVID. As President Trump fumbled, Fauci's authorities grew. how Anthony Fauci became America's doctor, the New Yorker wrote in April 2020. The nickname stuck. And I see there's a book published for kiddies called Dr. Fauci, How a Boy from Brooklyn Became America's Doctor, by Kate Messner, illustrated by Alexandra Bai. Once Joe Biden replaced Donald Trump, the title essentially became official. Fauci is now chief medical advisor to the president, in addition to his day job as head of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases. He's probably the world's best-known scientist. He earned that title the hard way by giving too many interviews to count. As the Washington Post explained in a glowing July 2020 profile, at first, as soon as Fauci was anywhere, he was everywhere. The New York Times dubbed him the explainer-in-chief for all things coronavirus, and he did his explaining to Laura Ingraham and Chris Cuomo in the largest papers and the littlest websites, on the early morning rundowns and the noontime Sunday shows. He showed up to chat with Trevor Noah and Stephen Curry. The schedule would have been grueling for a person half Fauci's age, especially since he had to find time between those interviews to, actually track the science around SARS-CoV-2 and vaccine and drug development. But he managed, and here's a picture of him lounging on the cover of In Style magazine, and the story is called The Good Doctor. With all due modesty, I think I'm pretty effective, Fauci told In Style. I certainly am energetic, and I think everybody thinks I'm doing more than an outstanding job. Berenson repeats that remarkable statement. With all due modesty, everyone thinks I'm doing more than an outstanding job. As the United States faces the biggest decisions yet of the epidemic, whether to force mRNA vaccines on unwilling Americans, whether to encourage booster shots for the already vaccinated, the way Fauci views himself and his critics deserve a look. To be clear, I'm not writing today about the substance of the choices we and Fauci face, nor will I examine the evidence that weeks after SARS-CoV-2 emerged, Fauci appeared worried the virus had leaked from a lab in Wuhan, performing the game of function research he championed. Those are crucial topics worthy of a deep dive. For now, I simply want to look at Fauci's attitude. Fauci has always been a skilled courtier. He said as much in a 2014 interview with the Journal of Clinical Investigation. I think one of the best things I did was realize this is the terrain, so get used to it and get good at it. Sometimes that means making sure powerful people know how much you care and respect them and even love them. And here is a email that Dr. Fauci sent in June of 2012 to Cheryl Mills and Lois Quam. Subject, remarks of Secretary of State Hillary Rodham Clinton. Cheryl, Lois, wow. Very rarely does a speech bring me to tears, but this one did it. Talking about telling it like it is. This was a bases-loaded home run. Please tell the secretary that I love her more than ever. You guys too, of course. Best regards, Tony. But Fauci made sure that those powerful people and everyone else understood he was a scientist first. Sometimes he would even offer a visual aid, as the post-2020 profile explained. Donna Shalala, Bill Clinton's Secretary of Health and Human Services, often sent Fauci to the Oval Office when Clinton's aides told her she had an hour with the commander-in-chief to do with what she wished. When Shalala asked Fauci to speak to the country, she had a special request. Put on your lab coat, because people trust the doc. Who was Tony Fauci to argue? Along the way, though, Fauci developed a healthy self-regard. Maybe he always had it when President George H.W. Bush asked him to run the entire National Institutes of Health in 1989. Fauci said, no, this is not the time for the general to leave the battlefield to go back to the Pentagon, he told Science magazine. Woe to anyone who disagreed with him, though. In August 2020, President Trump named Dr. Scott Atlas as a special advisor on coronavirus. Like Fauci, Atlas is a physician, although he comes from outside the public health establishment. Unlike Fauci, Atlas did not support lockdowns. Within weeks, Fauci attacked Atlas, telling CNN that Atlas was giving Trump information that was, quote, either taken out of context or actually incorrect, unquote. But Fauci hoped that he and Atlas could find common scientific ground. If I have an issue with someone, I try to sit down with them and let them know why I differ with them and see if we can come to some sort of resolution. I mean my differences with Dr. Atlas, I'm always willing to sit down and talk with him. which made an interview Fauci gave to Politico in January 2020 after Biden took over particularly interesting. Asked about Atlas, Fauci responded, quote, "He didn't undermine me because I didn't give a shit about him. I didn't really care what he said," unquote. So much for sitting down and talking, or a recent conversation about the pros and cons of lockdowns. With the public health establishment and the media on his side, Fauci was untouchable, and he knew it. Occasionally, if Fauci were challenged hard, his mask would slip even in public. Kentucky Senator Rand Paul found this out when he pushed Fauci on whether the NIH had funded gain-of-function research in China, research designed to make viruses more dangerous. "Senator Paul, you do not know what you are talking about, quite frankly," Fauci answered. "Quite frankly" became a Fauci catchphrase of sorts. Asked in October 2020 about the possibility of reaching widespread immunity against the coronavirus without waiting for a vaccine, he answered, "Quite frankly, that is nonsense." And anybody who knows anything about epidemiology will tell you that is nonsense and very dangerous. Anybody who knows anything about epidemiology apparently did not include the epidemiologist who had suggested the possibility. But Fauci's most stunning comment came 2 months ago in an interview with MSNBC. "Quite frankly, the attacks on me are attacks on science," he said. "If you were trying to, get at me as a public health official and a scientist, you're really attacking not only Dr. Anthony Fauci, you're attacking science." It's always a good sign when a bureaucrat starts speaking of himself in the third person, isn't it? The royal we. Berenson comments, "This level of arrogance would seem almost absurd if the stakes were not so high, but they are. The United States desperately needs a full and independent investigation into what Fauci and other officials knew about the risks of gain-of-function research and whether they worked to steer scientists and reporters away from examining the origins of the virus in 2020. Such an inquiry may turn out to be embarrassing for Fauci, but it should have happened already." Even more important, data from Israel and increasingly the United States show that the mRNA vaccines Fauci championed are far less effective than they seemed months ago. A rational response to their plunging effectiveness would be, at the least, to stop encouraging their use while scientists investigate why they have stopped working so quickly. Instead, Fauci is pressing Americans to take a third mRNA dose in the hope it will work better and longer than the original two. But no clinical trial data shows a third dose will induce infections, much less hospitalizations or deaths. And a research preprint released Monday, August the 23rd in Japan, suggests the Delta variant could evolve in a way that could produce vaccine antibody-dependent enhancement, a nightmare scenario. Figuring out whether this risk is real and what to do if it is will require open debate that may include uncomfortable moments for the public health advocates who have pressed these vaccines. Instead, Tony Fauci has taken the position that questioning him is attacking science. Unless he changes or is forced to change his attitude, we may have a hard time finding the answers we need. More on the sainted Dr. Fauci. This is from Steve Watson at Summit News. After the FDA fully approved the Pfizer COVID vaccine, Anthony Fauci immediately issued a decree via his permanent CNN propaganda platform that it is time for nationwide vaccine mandates. He said there was some poll that showed about 30% of people who are not anti-vax who are just waiting to get what they felt was the real final stamp of approval, which we just got today with the Pfizer product. And of course, again, no arm twisting, no coercion at the FDA. He continued, and those 30% are saying when that occurs, they will feel very, very comfortable about getting vaccinated. Is that really true? He added, they're going to give a lot of incentive and backing for a lot of institutions and organizations and places of employment to mandate. And that could be colleges, universities, the military organizations that employ a lot of people. Some of the big corporations are going to say, if you want to work for us in person, you've got to be there and get vaccinated. Fauci then dismissed freedom as an afterthought, noting, quote, "I know I respect people's freedom. Anyone who tells you that is lying, by the way. But when you're talking about a public health crisis that we've been going through for well over a year and a half, the time has come. Enough is enough. We've just got to get people vaccinated." Yes, well, who died and made him king? And in yet more Fauci news, this is from Lee Brown at the New York Post. Dr. Anthony Fauci has admitted making his latest mistake in coronavirus guidance, this time over when he thinks the pandemic will come under control, apologizing by saying, "My bad." The White House coronavirus czar had told NPR Monday that if enough people get vaccinated, the U.S. could really get some good control over this by the fall and winter of next year. But quizzed on it by CNN's Anderson Cooper later the same day, Fauci has been under fire repeatedly for flip-flopping on his public advice from the early days of the pandemic, said he actually thinks that control will come even sooner. Anderson, I have to apologize when I listened to the tape. I meant to say the spring of 2022, so I did misspeak. And what does Jim Kunstler have to say on this subject? Next in this week's throwdown parade is the FDA's imminent approval of Pfizer's COVID-19 vaccine without any of the usual extensive trials. How does that even happen with an efficacy rate of 39% maximum and a runaway train of vicious side effects, which I won't mention because I don't want to get banned? The so-called mRNA vaccines are also, I think I won't read that either. COVID-19 is an expedient device for exercising. Yeah, okay. And is being used liberally once again in the blue cities to make ordinary business as difficult as possible, even unto shutdown and ruin. FDA approval will further enable the mandatory vaccination of school children, government workers, and corporate employees. About half the country still refuses to get jabbed. You're about to see them go hardcore when the FDA makes its move. The shadow cabal behind Joe Biden will accordingly destroy what is left of public education as millions of parents withdraw their kids from the system. You will then see the rapid assembly of homeschooling networks that aggregate informally into small private academies. And of course, the biggest losers will be the minorities who lack the cultural mojo to homeschool. Well done, Joe Biden and the FDA. While you're at it, why not destroy higher ed too? That sound you'll hear is plywood getting nailed up on the windows of countless insolvent small colleges. And let's take a look at the chat. Okay, hello to Anrun, a Dawn from Beyond. Chokokin 666 dances, totalitarian tiptoe continues. Anrun says that it's amusing to think that some of us thought this COVID business would stop with Trump out of office. That's what I thought. I sincerely believe that Joe Biden was just going to, claim the win. Okay, that madman not living in the White House anymore. The experts are back in charge, and so we're just going to go back to normal now. No more panic. We don't need panic anymore because there's not a madman in the Oval Office. But no, he decided to own this. It's a remarkable thing that Joe Biden has done because the negative political effects of COVID-19 were felt most strongly by Donald Trump. And then Joe Biden stepped up to the podium and said, "Hold my vaccine." Hello to Gamion. We're breathing rarefied air here, as they like to say. Kontiki Roulette says Fauci has basically contradicted every statement he has made thus far. So apparently the science is flexible and fluid, but only their current approved version of the science. Palcasso 88, when it comes to lockdowns, vax passports, etc., my extended family are like Kevin Bacon in Animal House. Thank you, sir. May I have another? Sad. Hello to Dubareas. Forceful without a referendum mandating a new genetic therapy vaccine without any liability clause is simply tyrannical. Yeah. Apparently public health officials can just do these things, and I'll be getting to my own province of British Columbia soon on that issue. We don't seem to have a legislature here in British Columbia. Don Willis says, mandates coming? How many bad ideas, laws are sold under the banner for the children? Chokin 666 says this level of totalitarianism is unprecedented. This is why I and others cheer the Taliban. Palcasso 88 says, Kevin, did you see the poll that showed the PPC, that is the People's Party of Canada, led by Maxime Bernier, tied with the Liberals in Alberta? No, I did not see that, but I'm glad to see it. I will be speaking of Aaron O'Toole shortly. Chogokin 666, Wu-Tang, it's for the children. Contiki Roulette says, the phrase off-grid is no longer about going off the electric grid, is now about going off the control grid. Anyone care to take a guess which episode number will feature cops breaking down Kevin's door and forcibly jabbing him on air? Dan says, what's the title of this Black Mirror episode we're currently living in? Hello to William Hicks. I saw a story saying that McKinsey is in charge of the Ontario government's response to COVID-19. Has anyone else heard this? That would explain a lot of things. Hello to Clownvelt. A lot of talk about rats. Sometimes I zone out when Kevin talks about COVID. It's not Kevin's fault. It's just too depressing and infuriating. I understand your point. William Hicks says Fauci removed his mask with the recent CNN appearance. Yeah, Bonnie Taylor, I suppose, Bonnie Henry is going to be wearing hers again. Deborah says Nazis actually separated the Jews under the pretext of protecting them from typhoid. William Hicks says, supervisor says, HR wants to talk to you about the change in policy. Everyone is getting vaxxed. You're on board, right? Associate replies, yeah, sure, but I'll need to talk to my wife. Chokehin666 says, I know no one who's been affected by this disease other than KMG's dad, RIP. This has been brought up many times, many times. That Joe Biden fatuously said during the election campaign that the people at the dinner table were no longer sitting at the dinner table. Well, seeing as the average age of death at that time was about 85, these people were not sitting at the dinner table because Americans and Canadians do not have 85-year-old relatives living with them. They put them in homes. When someone says, quite frankly, what follows is always a lie, says Buddy. No, that's pretty good. That's pretty good advice too. Hello to Red Sulfur. There's a new name. Biden is a senile muppet. How long is he going to be president for? I mean, he spoke to America again today, didn't he? William Hicks says many people are going to learn some of the lessons of the Depression era. Owing a lot of money on one's house, credit cards, student loans means you can't afford to lose your job. Backs away, Mr. McManus. KMG, Paul Drake stands, says Paul Casso 88. Red Sulfur says a lot of Afghans look pretty European and they are classified as white officially by the U.S. government. Jeffrey Pye says on the lighter side, I'd love to hear your take on XTC. I like XTC, and Andy Partridge is a genuine English eccentric, but his strident atheism and how would you put it? Feminism? Oh, yes, back in the good old days of the matriarchy. Okay. Hello to Alex DeLarge. What chances are conservatives to get Justin out of office? Well, I'll be talking about that shortly. This is from 3 reporters at USA Today. Americans' harsh judgment on Afghanistan costs, so they should say cuts Biden approval down to 41%. When you use like 10% in a week, that is not good. And the worst is yet to come. Let's see, of those surveyed, 62% put the responsibility for the Afghanistan war on George W. Bush. Half approved of his handling of the pandemic, 39% of his handling of the economy. Biden's decision to leave Afghanistan was approved by most Americans, but only 26% approved of Biden's handling of the withdrawal. Yeah, how about having, a high civil servant say that when other countries, such as Britain and France, move to rescue their people, they should stop, do it, because it's embarrassing the Americans. Where does he find these people? Well, I know where he finds them. There's a piece by Dan Winchester in the American Sun called The Myths of Afghanistan, and I won't say that it's a conspiracy theory. I'm really in no position to judge whether this is true or not, but America is not leaving Afghanistan, is the gist of it. Increasingly, the U.S. military was replaced by private contractors, private fighters, and they're still going to be there. There's also the argument that, well, the United States is supporting ISIL, or ISIS, as we used to call it. And this is true. This is an interesting. The Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant was the subject of much news until recently. As one writer insightfully notes, ISIL is an Islamist militant group that strangely fights not wars against Christians or Europe or America or even Jews in Israel. No, they fight wars against other Muslims. Assad in Syria, Hezbollah in Lebanon, and Houthis in Yemen. They even fight against China and Iran in Afghanistan. This is all public knowledge. Absent from this list is Israel. Despite being nominally anti-Semitic, ISIL has published an article explaining their decision not to attack Israel. And of course, Israel famously took in wounded ISIS fighters. ISIL is known to have accidentally fired on the IDF once, for which it then apologized. ISIL therefore only attacks a list of enemies that are A, nationalist, and B, curiously resembles the occupational classes list of enemies, and it does so with American munitions. Again, well, Afghanistan is an ungovernable country. So, the civil war, or the ongoing civil war, is going to pick up again soon enough. Of course, people have been talking about Joe Biden's senility for a long time. The American media was not speaking about it. Last year, when it mattered, during the election, we had the extraordinary spectacle of a man running for president who refused to campaign. No one, there was a lid on him at 11 o'clock or 10:30 in the morning or 10 o'clock, and every so often he'd be dragged out from his basement in Wilmington to some phony event where camera angles were used to make it look like there was actually a crowd there when there wasn't, simply reporters. Who campaigns without a crowd? So we all know what's wrong with Joe Biden, but the question is, what is wrong with Kamala Harris? Whenever she appears in public, regardless of the circumstances, whenever she is asked a question, she begins cackling inanely. Is this, I've experienced this myself, and I'm sure some people listening to this have, that when I'm in very nervous situations, I occasionally, laugh nervously. Is that what's happening with Kamala Harris? That being the vice president of the United States is simply too much for her, and her inane cackling is a reaction to this? Now, this is funny. This is from the Daily Mail. Elizabeth Elkind and Emily Craig. White House demands apology from Fox News after disgusting host says Joe Biden failed the country by letting her mentally frail husband, Joe, run for president. Joe Biden's press secretary, Michael LaRosa, demanded Fox News apologize. He was reacting to a Sunday segment on Fox and Friends in which co-host Rachel Campos Duffy seemed to partially blame the First Lady for Afghanistan. Campos Duffy suggested the First Lady would have stopped Biden from running for president if she loved him and said Biden is mentally frail. Campos Duffy said she was making the comments as a fellow political spouse. Her husband, Sean Duffy, served in the House of Representatives until 2019. They kept this under the rug for as long as possible, but Biden has been, well, I would say, lying to the American people for the last week, or saying that was 3 or 4 days ago. Oh, Dad, 3 or 4 days ago. well, why would anyone remember something that happened 3 or 4 days ago? He doesn't seem to have any idea what's actually going on in Afghanistan. We learned today that the deadline of August the 31st is not going to be extended. In any event, the Taliban is not letting people into the airport. An interesting perspective on this silly woman, Dr. Jill, from Thomas Lifson at the American Thinker. How many degrees does this woman have? I believe it's 5. I believe it's 5 degrees. The issue of Jill Biden's educational honorific isn't new. As long ago as 2009, the LA Times devoted a story to the study. From the piece by Robin Abkarian, Joe Biden on the campaign trail explained that his wife's desire for the highest degree was in response to what she perceived as her second-class status on their mail. She said, "I was so sick of the mail coming to Senator and Mrs. Biden, I wanted to get mail addressed to Dr. and Senator Biden." That's the real reason she got her doctorate, he said. Some comments. Of course, I'm not privy to the private conversations of the President and First Lady, but given the frank admission that Mrs. Biden was animated by a lust for title in obtaining a doctorate in education with a term paper length dissertation from a third-tier school of education, I tend to see her as Lady McBiden pushing and manipulating her hapless near ward to keep her own grips on perks, title, and prerogatives. The majority of the country now recognizes he is not mentally fit for the office he holds. It's happened before with Edith Wilson. It might well be happening now. All right. I believe I spoke last week about Bonnie Henry and what seemed to me, she's the chief latrine walla of my province of British Columbia, and a return to sanity, a much welcome return to sanity from her. Something happened. Twitter started beating up on her. Yeah, it seems to have been that simple. She was photographed at BC Place Stadium in Vancouver, attending a BC Lions game, having a good time. She's known to be a jolly woman, and I know someone who used to work with her. And she's enjoying the game, and there's 2 young men sitting in the row in front of her, and they want a picture of her. They want pictures of her, and they want her to say, "No masks." I guess maybe they're taking a video. And she does. She shouts out, "No masks." Now, of course, you're going to shout, you're going to exhale more droplets. Supposedly deadly droplets. She wasn't wearing a mask, and the 2 men were not wearing masks. As to their vaccination status, I can only guess. And for days and days and days, Fire Bonnie Henry was trending on Twitter. Apparently, she wasn't being draconian enough. She's fixed that. She has fixed that. Before I tell you how, there's this embarrassing display on Government Street, corner of Government in Pandora. There's been a construction hoarding there for a long time, a year and a half or more. So it's become a place of hagiography, where there were these idealized portraits of Theresa Tam, who is Canada's federal chief latrine walla, and ASL interpreter Nigel Howard. Who? What? Someone scribbled nonsense on Theresa Tam's face, propaganda on Nigel Howard's face, and obey on Bonnie Henry's. This had previously been vandalized, and the portrait of Bonnie Henry had been completely removed. It was then restored. I checked a couple of days ago, and it is gone again. These Karens, are very strong in their opinions, and since Bonnie Henry was not seemingly intent on punishing everyone in the province, she became the villain. Oh, here's another hate crime. This is from Joel Ballard, CBC News. The Vancouver Police Department says it is investigating a possible hate crime after a memorial acknowledging a racist chapter in Canada's history was vandalized over the weekend. On Sunday, the Komagatu Muru Memorial in the Cole Harbour neighborhood was vandalized with white paint. Frontline officers and other specially trained investigators worked throughout the evening yesterday and will continue to gather evidence in this disturbing crime. Vancouver Police Department Sergeant Steve Addison said in a release, "This investigation is a priority and we are committed to finding out who's responsible and why they did this." Nearly 400 South Asian migrants were aboard the Komagatu Muru, which was anchored just off Cole Harbour in 1914 when it was turned away from Canada due to exclusion laws. Well, here's what happened. Capitalists in British Columbia were determined to bust unions and to bring wages as low as possible. So they decided to import as many people from India as possible. And the idea was, well, we're just going to show up in the boats. So what are they going to do? Send us back? Well, Mackenzie King sent them back. Thank God for that. Later, in the 1980s and 1990s, the boats just started showing up off the coast of British Columbia. And thanks to a 1986 Supreme Court decision by our wretched Critarchy, anyone who appears on Canadian soil or in Canadian waters cannot be deported. And so what has Bonnie Henry done? It's just a double whammy here. She has instituted a vaccine mandate, which takes effect on September the 13th. And it bans people who are not fully vaccinated from all indoor places, including patios in restaurants. Once a week, I go out and meet a friend and sit on a patio of a restaurant a couple of miles from here, and beginning on September the 13th, I won't be allowed to do that. And, no exemptions. No medical or religious exemptions allowed to this vaccine passport system. So, sorry. It wasn't draconian enough. And people were beating up on Bonnie Henry again. And so today we get this. The BC government is bringing back its mask mandate for indoor public settings to combat the province's ongoing surge in COVID-19 cases. Provincial Health Officer Dr. Bonnie Henry announced the reintroduction of the mask requirement on Tuesday, pointing to the alarmingly contagious Delta variant and the significant number of BC residents who remain unvaccinated. This measure is needed to ensure that these indoor settings are as safe as they can be for all of us as we head into the fall. Now, I'm sure you see the lapse in logic there, right? You see the lapse in logic that people are being forced to get vaccinated or they can't do any indoor activities. Well, for the moment, grocery stores and liquor stores are still available. But that's not enough. So even though everyone who is appearing indoors now has to be double jabbed, they have to wear masks anyway. So either the vaccines don't work or the masks don't work or neither of them work. I mean, this is obvious to everyone, right? It's obvious to everyone, but apparently not to Bonnie Henry or the BC government. And again, we don't have a parliament, a legislature who makes these decisions. Bonnie does. She just gets a hold of the health minister and the premier and says, "This is what we're doing now." And they say, "Okay, then. I mean, you're the expert. You are the expert." BC teachers would not oppose mandatory vaccinations, a union says. Mandatory vaccinations of who? Them or for the children as well? And no. This mask mandate, it started in BC about a year ago. And I just thought it was absolutely ridiculous at the time, but it just keeps going on and on and on and on. And I don't know, what do they want? Do they want a revolution? Seems they're flirting with it. And okay, yeah, let's look at some numbers here, just so I can get a little angrier here. Okay, let's go to the official numbers of the province of British Columbia, which is a province of about 5.2 million people. So they're just stacking up those dead bodies like cordwood, right? No, they are not. Currently hospitalized in my province, 138. Currently in critical care, 78. But as you know, I live on an island called Vancouver Island. And islands have shown themselves to have, many fewer cases than mainlands. So what's happening here on Vancouver Island? 43 people have died of COVID-19 since February of last year, 18 months. You do the math. That is less than 3 per month. Less than 3 per month. These are up-to-date figures, August 24th, 2021, 4 p.m. The hospitals, they're just being overwhelmed, right? Currently hospitalized 10, currently admitted to ICU 12. There's about 800,000 people on Vancouver Island, but all the regions must be treated the same for some insane reason. How come they get to do this in Vancouver Island? We don't get to do it in Vancouver, Yes. I thought I recognized this person's name and face. The Ottawa's largest school board, the Ontario Carleton District School Board, to talk mandatory vaccination masks for kindergartners at emergency meeting. Trustee Lyra Evans is bringing several motions to make rules stricter. And she knows lots about medicine because she's had lots of medical procedures. She is the first openly trans school board trustee in Canada. Of course, not possible for this person to beget children, but I suppose that's not particularly relevant, is it? If you want to get an indication of the elite and how much they hate us, excuse me, here's a fellow who, despite his failure after failure after failure, continues to be at the top of the elite. And this is a story by Steve Watson at Summit News. Former head of the NSA and the CIA during the George W. Bush presidency, General Michael Hayden, declared he thinks it would be a good idea to send unvaccinated supporters of President Trump to die in Afghanistan. What's the old joke about saying the quiet part out loud? Hayden, who infamously declared that the Fourth Amendment changed on September 11, 2001, and went on to oversee mass surveillance of Americans at the NSA while the invasion of Afghanistan was implemented, made the comments on Twitter. Hayden also retweeted a picture labeling Trump MAGA supporters as our Taliban. These are a bunch of pickup trucks with large American flags and MAGA flags, and that makes them the Taliban. Hayden has previously compared Trump's border policy to Nazi death camps. Oh, other governments have separated mothers and children. Hayden tweeted, oh, you mean like the Bush government and the Obama government, like those governments? And there is a picture below of Auschwitz. It's some pretty subtle political commentary there from General Michael Hayden. Now, a phenomenon is serious when it affects celebrities. So I should take back comments about, who knows anyone who's had COVID or has been severely affected by it. This is from Gabrielle Chung at People magazine. Melissa Joan Hart contracts breakthrough COVID, likely after kids exposed at school. If it wasn't for those meddling kids without masks, I think as a country, we got a little lazy, and I'm really mad that my kids didn't have to wear a mask at school, Melissa Jo Hart said. She sounds like a wonderful mother. There seems to be some controversy about what's going on in Japan. New South Wales Premier Gladys, and this is a tough name, Berejiklian, announces there is no return to normal life. Even if there are no COVID cases and 80% of the population are vaccinated, social distancing and restrictions will remain for good. Sounds like a pleasant place to live. But this from Zero Hedge, Tyler Durden, Australia rethinks COVID strategy after cases hit record despite draconian lockdowns. Oh, yes, and there's the famous chart which shows lockdown, and then lockdown. It doesn't make any difference. Oh, yeah, we've licked this disease and we have to end the lockdown eventually because the economy collapses and then the number of cases just soars. As Alex Berenson likes to say, virus going to virus. I suppose this story has had more effect or horrified more people than some of the other stories, mandatory vaccinations, mandatory masking of 5-year-olds. This is from the Sydney Morning Herald by Angus Thompson. Several impounded dogs due to be rescued by a shelter have instead been shot dead by a rural council in New South Wales under its interpretation of COVID-19 restrictions, alarming animal activists and prompting a government probe. Berkshire Council in the state's northwest killed the dogs to prevent volunteers at a Cobar-based animal shelter from traveling to pick up the animals last week, according to council's watchdog, the Office of Local Government. OLG has been informed that the council decided to take this course of action to protect its employees and community, including vulnerable Aboriginal populations, from the risk of COVID-19 transmission. When they start shooting dogs, I guess you know that they are serious. Oh, here's another dog story for you, and it's not a happy dog story either. And what a dink this guy is. This is from Citizen Free Press. Governor Andrew Cuomo, who has been staying with one of his sisters in Westchester County in the final days of his third term, recently has asked staff members at the executive mansion if anyone would like to keep his dog, Captain, who has remained the state-owned residence after the governor moved out last week. Two state police sources told the Times-Union on Saturday that the governor had recently asked mansion staff members if anyone would be interested in caring for the dog Captain, a high-strung mix of Shepherd, Siberian, and Malamute, has nipped a few people since Cuomo adopted him in 2018, the sources said, and a mansion staffer recently took the dog home for a few days, but decided he was too much. Well, Joe Biden did the same thing. Joe Biden is not a dog person, but I'm president of the United States and I need a dog. Not one dog, but two dogs. Cuomo decides to get a dog, a very large dog, a mixed breed, which likes biting people. And I guess he didn't want to take it home with him. But again, a dog like this, it's going to need a lot of attention. He could have got a dachshund or something like that, but no, he's a manly man, so he has to get a big manly dog. And Australasia, the gold standard for world insanity. This is from the Daily Mail. New Zealand sees its highest increase in COVID cases since April 2020. And there's a picture of that sad Muslim lady, Jacinda Ardern. Ardern was slammed for the unfathomable decision to extend the harsh lockdown on Monday in response to the rising cases, which has led to a total of 8 people being hospitalized. Yeah, you can just see just panic stations there. 8 people hospitalized. We can't handle that. There's a study here. Well, this is from Mother Jones, Edwin Rios, which is not a source I normally quote, but this is an interesting story. CDC study: Black and Latinx adults died at startlingly higher rates during the pandemic. During the COVID pandemic, life expectancy for Black Americans fell by 2.9 years. Latinx Americans, who typically live longer than Black Americans and white, lost 3 years of their lives. Now, a new Centers for Disease Control study published Friday found that Black, Latinx, and Native American / Alaskan Native adults have died at startlingly higher rates during the COVID pandemic than in typical years. I'm going to go to the original article here, and as Steve Saylor would say, have some fun with Control F. Does the word obesity appear in this story? No, it does not. So this story gives the impression that somehow the disease is racist, or hospitals are racist, or doctors are racist, or the vaccine is racist, because why is this happening? Well, as we've known pretty much from the beginning, death from COVID-19 is verily highly correlated to BMI, and that's a very interesting topic, but Mother Jones does not want to mention that salient fact. I don't want to talk about masks. I'm going to get myself in trouble talking about masks. The studies are out there. You know, you just look up masks studies, you'll get the information you need, particularly the Denmark study. This is from Bloomberg. Anecdotes tell us what the data can't. Vaccinated people appear to be getting the coronavirus at a surprisingly high rate, but exactly how often isn't clear, nor is it certain how likely they are to spread the virus to others. Well, look to Israel and to England, and you will get those answers. William Briggs, a statistician to the stars, has a new column today. How will experts end the panic they created? The long run. Don't forget, experts not only created the bug, but the panic caused by the bug. Experts also assure us they have the solutions to the problem they created. Again, it is difficult to imagine a situation where the government of the United States funds research in China in a barely competent lab led by the Bat Lady, the purpose of which is to make deadly diseases deadlier and more easily transmissible. Why aren't all these people in prison? Let's go to Lockdown Skeptics, or Daily Skeptic, as it is now called. The war on COVID should be over. We do not need lockdowns. The virus now joins 200 other pathogens, give or take, in regular circulation in human societies. The war on COVID should be over, writes Jay Bhattacharya in the Express. And Roger and Devin's mother died from a kidney infection after being treated over the phone by her GP. You could see Mom was still ill. The GP said she was fine. She passed away. Having not seen anybody, had she been able to go in, I feel this wouldn't have happened. FDA approval of Pfizer COVID vaccine will lead to more vaccine mandates, says Dr. Fauci. Isn't it time the woke boys in blue started policing our streets, not our tweets? You may have heard about this. The rainbow-colored cars that English police are now driving around in. And the suggestion is people will run up to the police and say, "Oi, it's a hate crime on Twitter. Yeah, I'll show you." And yeah, then the police will not miss any mean tweets. On Twitter, Nicola Sturgeon, who is the First Minister of Scotland, once again refuses to rule out further lockdowns. What a nasty looking woman she is. And we have let's see, the latest paper from Neil Ferguson et al. Defending the lockdown policy is out of date, inaccurate, and misleading. Sweden bashing, actually, is what it is. July's age standardized mortality rate was equal to the 5-year average. In any, large country, any large area, a lot of people die every year. And we're going to see more and more of this, for two reasons. Because the population, say, in North America is getting older, and it is also getting fatter. So no, we're going to see more and more people die every year. It's unavoidable. And let's go to Alex Berenson for a final look. And this information from Israel, and now not just Israel, is absolutely shocking. Very, very important paper out of Japan suggests Delta is mutating in a way that may soon produce ADE to the Pfizer vaccine through NTD mutations, and boosters may make the problem worse. And 4 countries with nothing in common except very low vaccination rates by US, UK, Israeli standards. India and Palestine are under 10% fully vaccinated. Colombia and Romania under 30%. The epidemic must be out of control in them. Cases through the roof. Oh, no, they're not. Berenson asks, time to start asking WTF is going on. Oh, is it fun? It's a fun poll. Which media outlet will be the first to refer to the rushed Trump vaccines? Well, I have been speaking out against warp speed right from the time that it was announced, because this is not how medicine is supposed to be done. But Trump was determined to get a big victory there, but I don't think he has to worry about that, because Biden has just embraced this. He owns it now. Things that don't count. Papers from Japan, dying 13 days after your second dose. Full approval that isn't exactly full approval. Myocarditis, first dose spikes. Data from Europe or Israel or anywhere that's telling anything remotely resembling the truth. There was a particular one here. Oh, I'm hoping for all our sakes it ends very soon. Oh, yes. I checked the sourcing and this email is correct. Barring data lags or some other anomalies, over 60% of deaths in Clark County, Nevada, which includes Las Vegas, are now in vaccinated people, which shouldn't surprise anyone who knows the UK or Israeli data. Human biology is the same everywhere. I'm going to talk about the Conservative Party, so-called, in just a second, but let's go to the chat. What if people want to visit their relatives in old people's homes? Do they end them too, says Contiki Roulette. Alex DeLarge asks about the Canadian election. I'm getting to it momentarily. They shot the damn dogs for no reason, says Gamion. I'm not really sentimental about animals, but this was just so completely senseless. I mean, clearly somebody thought, or a bunch of people thought, we can do this. We can actually shoot these dogs and blame it on COVID and get away with it. No sleep until Breezewood, PA. Hello, says Australia is like if a country were entirely governed by the ATF. Chinese internet stocks, Alex DeLarge. I've heard some very, very bad things. They're listed on the NASDAQ or whatever. That doesn't prove anything. You adopt an animal, you make a commitment, don't, says Jokin 666. Yes. Anwin says dachshunds can be massive pains in the rear and are often yappy. Oh, perhaps. I don't know. I've seen some. I don't know. I just think that they're amusing to look at. And when they can't jump up on your furniture because they can't jump. When I found out that they were bred to kill badgers, that was very impressive to me. I must say. Let's see who else do it. Hello, Quachalango and Ashi Main Bravo. Richard Spencer said on the Kill stream that mass non-white immigration to the USA is good for purging what he calls weak whites. He said only the strong Aryans like himself will survive. Strong, huh? Except when his wife doesn't want to watch James Bond anymore. You can't cross international borders without being vaccinated, says Alex DeLarge. Who are you voting for in Canadian election? Oh, this is a question to Alex DeLarge, okay, who says he's not voting. Why do those stories about those who were vaxxed but then got COVID consistently emphasize that things would have been much worse had they not been vaxxed? How can anyone know that? Well, that's a good question. Well, no, again, when this first came up, I could hardly believe it. Oh, well, it turns out that, yeah, there are breakthrough cases, but you don't need to worry, except if you live in, Israel or Clark County, Nevada, because, it's going to be very mild. The vaccines were not sold as palliatives. They were sold as prophylactics, and they are no longer efficacious or very efficacious for this purpose. KMG should talk about something more cheery like Perry Mason or dunking on Star Trek. Hello to our valiant moderator, Chad Chadson, says, mandatory mask starting Friday in Oregon. Well, that's not a surprise. Thank you for your service, Chad Chadson. Hello to the antisocial contract. That is a new name in the chat. Seems to me, anyway. And did persons inoculated with the polio vaccine still get polio? In one trial, 300 of them died, I believe. Bit of a scandal at the time. But you can read up about the two different kinds of polio vaccines and how they are, I can't say this word, I don't think, on YouTube, but it's a 5-letter word. It begins with an L and ends with a Y. And there's a K in it. Because if they are, this is very bad news. Very, very bad news indeed. On my trail of disgrace, says Twitter keeps forcing the ridiculous COVID fact checks in trending. Most recently, there's nothing unsafe about wearing soggy masks for hours and hours, especially for children. In fact, it's healthy. Also, the best part is that children don't need to see faces. This is hot off the press. Pelcasso88 says, Kevin, are you happy with your viewer numbers? I don't know, perhaps. If I got to be popular in any way, I don't think I'm going to last on YouTube. I mean, they've been taking on a whole bunch of people, including a rather profane but amusing movie site. Well, it talks about TV as well, hosted by a puppet called Professor Tosspot. The site is called Smack Talk, and he gets the videos pulled down for reasons. His shows aren't political. Unless saying that Brie Larson has resting bitch face can be considered to be political. I don't follow Alex Jones, so I don't know of this fellow Owen Schroyer. I did find out about the Satanist who got all this money from the FBI. I'm not aware of a debate between E. Michael Jones and who was the other fellow there, the editor of American Renaissance magazine? Yes, Jared Taylor. I'm not familiar with this. I should look it up, I suppose. Mandatory masks outdoors, including state parks. Is this in Oregon? Is this for real? Oh, the science. You're all about the science, are you? Do you have any idea how vast the architecture, the atmosphere is? Oh, here's the story I was talking about. This is from Andrew White at National File, and it's feds all the way down, as usual. A court filing in the case of a high-profile neo-Nazi group member has ousted Joshua Caleb Sutter as a longtime informant for the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Sutter, the publisher of Martinet Press, is allegedly an Atomwaffen member and a key figure in the satanic group known as the O9A Temple of Blood. Well, you meet all sorts of interesting people working for the American government, don't you? Okay, let's talk about the Canadian election. First week was supposed to be Erin O'Toole's. Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister and leader of the Liberal Party, he has a temper problem. He's one of those people who have not said no to him in his life. And he busts up rather nasty when people say no to him. Someone asks a question, about immigration. You're racist. You're racist. Only a racist would ask that question. But I'm looking at the homepage of conservative.ca. It's the Conservative Party of Canada's official site. And there's Erin O'Toole greeting a child waving a Canadian flag. The child is standing next to its mothers, and they are both Africans. Okay? It is clear by their physiognomy that they have not been very long in my country. There are not many Africans in Canada, but Erin O'Toole has to there's only two people, and one of them is not even a potential voter. There's only two people besides Erin in this banner shot, and two of them are Africans. Yeah, that pretty much tells you all you need to know about Erin O'Toole. Let's find out more about this man with the woman's name. We've talked about this before. Erin literally means Ireland. And so if you thought that having the surname of O'Toole wasn't Irish enough, then you can name your son with a girl's name. This is from Chris Selly at the National Post. Masked O'Toole drives home message on Liberal recklessness. And O'Toole regularly appears outside wearing a mask. And here he is doing this ridiculously gay elbow bump. Some people have no shame. Dateline Richmond, BC, the Conservative campaign clearly wants everyone to know that it takes the fourth wave of COVID-19 very, very seriously. It bolstered leaders Erin O'Toole's position that Liberal leader Justin Trudeau's election call was reckless. Oh, just shut up. Look, this is the way that it works. Oh, there's a law against that. No parliament can bind another parliament. That is the premier rule of parliament. Parliament is sovereign. And if the Prime Minister wants an election and the Government General is going to give him one, then we get an election. If people in Canada are upset with having another election, they can always vote against the Liberal Party. That's the way it works. That's the way it's always worked. Except during photo ops with his wife Rebecca, daughter Molly, and son Jack, and when speaking into a microphone, O'Toole is always masked in public. His campaign workers and volunteers follow suit quite assiduously. Reporters along for the ride self-administer and submit rapid antigen tests every morning. The charming suburban Quebec City beer garden, where O'Toole held his first open to the public campaign event on Wednesday afternoon, had posted its masking policy at the entrance: wear a mask or don't, it's up to you. But when Chicoutimi-Lefjord MP Richard Martel took the stage to introduce O'Toole, he politely suggested it was best the crowd mask up for safety. There wasn't a lot of uptake, perhaps because a good few patrons hadn't actually come to see O'Toole and were eating. O'Toole does not shake hands with reporters or even bump fists. He bumps elbows instead. This is a man who, on National Anti-Bullying Day, dressed up his own son, 9 years old or something, in a pink T-shirt, making this ridiculous gesture. It's just so embarrassing. So very embarrassing. Here's more from Chris Selly from the National Post. O'Toole swings for the fences in Quebec. If the Conservatives' pitch to Quebecers under Erin O'Toole doesn't catch the province's fancy, the party's next leader might just want to ignore the place entirely and see if that works any better. If politics were logical, which it is not, O'Toole's platform, cheerful personality, and strong French ought to form the most compelling package modern Tories have ever offered the province. And his appeal to nationalists on Wednesday evening in Quebec City could only have been more intense had it been delivered on bended knee. More bribery to Quebec. Oh, and I am pro-choice. I have always been pro-choice, O'Toole averred. A Conservative government will respect the right of women to choose for themselves, full stop. He actually used the word abortion, which is generally not the done thing. Oh, I also believe in climate change. Oh, boasting of a realistic and ambitious plan to fight it. Yes. Showing what's what to mankind's eternal enemy, carbon. All Quebec nationalists are welcome in the Conservative Party. It is your home, he said. Join us at the decision-making table in Ottawa. It is your table, and we will achieve great things together. The contract with Quebecers promises more control over immigration and refugees, to extend Bill 101 to federally regulated businesses in Quebec, to work toward a single tax return for Quebecers without any Canada Revenue Agency jobs being lost in the province, unconditional and increased health and social services transfers, and all the tools necessary to protect Quebec's built heritage and architecture. Well, as Peter Bermelo wrote years ago, that if Quebec cannot be persuaded to leave Canada, it should be expelled, because the bribery and the blackmail, they never stop. Quebec gets enough money from Western Canada to have $10 a day daycare. That's not enough. They had to be given, what, $12 billion more, no strings attached, meaning they're not going to spend that money on daycare. They're just going to spend it on something else. And here's another story about Erin. Conservative candidate apologizes after calling George Floyd protesters criminals. This is from Nick Boisvert at CBC. We have a role in stamping out racism. It is not possible to stamp out racism, even if it could be satisfactorily determined what racism actually means. Any attempt to stamp out racism is of necessity totalitarian. A Conservative candidate running on Vancouver Island is apologizing today after video surfaced in which he criticized protests following the murder of George Floyd. The criminals who were using this as an excuse, this tragic event, to loot and to burn, they need to be brought to justice every bit as much as the four thugs who ended Mr. Floyd's life, said David Bush, who is running in Saanich Gulf Islands riding. How many people were assaulted or killed during those riots the last summer? Portions of the video were posted on Twitter this morning by Talib Nur Mohammed, the Liberal candidate for Vancouver Glanville. Erin O'Toole didn't mention racism even once in his platform, yet he supports candidates like David Bush in BC. There's no place for this in Canada. We must all speak out against the Conservatives' efforts to drive us apart. I apologize for my insensitive remarks. That's not who I am as a person, Bush said in a statement today. Conservative Party candidates strive to be respectful and inclusive of others. To those I offended, please accept my sincere apology. Yes, and so the CBC has some fact checking for us. The Armed Conflict Location and Event Data Project, which tracks data on political violence and protests globally, called the 2020 Black Lives Matter protests an overwhelmingly peaceful movement in a report published last year. There is little evidence to suggest that demonstrators have engaged in widespread violence, the report found. No, just all that footage. Thousands of hours of it, of cities being burned. Yeah, but no, the Conservative Party of Canada, you gots to love St. George Floyd. Perhaps why there were two Africans on the landing page of the Conservative Party of Canada. Oh, it just gets better. Aaron O'Toole effectively wants to decriminalize the possession of all drugs. Treat drug addiction as health, not criminal issue, O'Toole says in plan to tackle opioid crisis. This is from Kathleen Harris at CBC. O'Toole offered on Sunday a compassionate plan to tackle the opioid crisis, treating it as a national emergency to help those battling drug addiction. O'Toole said 17 Canadian deaths each day are related to opioids and that the health crisis has deepened during the pandemic. As Prime Minister, I will treat the opioid epidemic as the health crisis that it is. That means our focus should be on helping people with addictions get the help they need to recover. So you're going to make it easier for people to use drugs, and this is going to mean less drug use. This is a failed project, which is about a quarter century old, and it just gets worse. The promises part of the party's election platform book include $325 million over 3 years to create 1,000 new treatment beds and build 50 recovery centers in communities across the country. Yeah, I want a recovery center right across the street from where I am, and I'm sure all Canadians listening to this, they want a recovery center in their neighborhoods too. The plan also commits to enhancing culturally appropriate treatment and prevention services in high-needs First Nations communities, and to provide $1 billion over 5 years in additional funding for Indigenous mental health and drug treatment programs. Yes, more Gibbs for the Indians. Asked by reporters whether he supports the decriminalization of drugs, O'Toole said he advocates judicial discretion for treatment options rather than criminal sanctions. Yes, I wonder how many heroin users are arrested every day in Canada. 5, 3, 1, 0? I'm not exaggerating, by the way. Law enforcement should focus on dealers and traffickers, not on those suffering from an addiction, O'Toole added. Anyone who, well, you can go back and listen to my review of Theodore Dalrymple's Romancing Opiates to learn exactly how much contempt I have for this fatuous view of what is a moral problem. And what's more from Aaron O'Toole? He promises progress on all Indigenous truth and reconciliation calls to actions. Well, I suppose there won't be any Canada left after that, will there? And yes, he's talking up abortion again and just how much he loves abortion. Oh, by the way, you know what else Aaron O'Toole loves? Banning so-called conversion therapy. So if your 11-year-old daughter decides she's actually a boy and you think this is a rash decision and not a good one, and you arrange to have her speak to a psychologist or psychiatrist or some such therapist, then you're breaking the law and could go to prison. Oh, and no money must change hands. This is Trudeau's top priority. He says why it should be criminal for people who want to change their behavior to go to speak to people who would help them change their behavior. That's an interesting question. Well, I guess we know why that is, because homosexuality is pretty much sacred in my country now. That all the political leaders are bullied into marching in the pride parades. They all do it. They have to. Oh, but who is Aaron O'Toole running against? This got a lot of attention in the United States. Trudeau says Canadians need to counter the she-cession and turn it into a she-covery. Yeah, he actually said that. Because he's an idiot. He's an absolute idiot. And again, a man who has not heard the word no very often in his life. Let's go back to Joseph Tainter and his 1988 book, The Collapse of Complex Societies. The Ik. The Ik are a people of northern Uganda who live at what must surely be the extreme of deprivation and disaster. A largely hunting and gathering people who have in recent times practiced some crop planting, the Ik are not classifiable as a complex society in the sense of Chapter 2. They are nonetheless a morbidly fascinating case of collapse in which a former low level of social complexity has essentially disappeared. Due to drought and disruption by national boundaries of the traditional cycle of movement, the Ik live in such a food and water scarce environment that there is absolutely no advantage to reciprocity and social sharing. The Ik, in consequence, display almost nothing of what could be called societal organization. They are so highly fragmented that most activities, including subsistence, are pursued individually. Each Ik will spend days or weeks on his or her own, searching for food and water. Sharing is virtually non-existent. Two siblings or other kin can live side by side, one dying of starvation and the other well-nourished, without the latter giving the slightest assistance to the other. The family as a social unit has become dysfunctional. Even conjugal pairs don't form a cooperative unit, except for a few specific purposes. Their motivation for marriage or cohabitation is that one person can't build a house alone. The members of a conjugal pair forage alone and do not share food. Indeed, their foraging is so independent that if both members happen to be at their residence together, it is by accident. Each conjugal compound is stockaded against the others. Several compounds together form a village, but this is a largely meaningless occurrence. Villages have no political functions or organization, not even a central meeting place. Children are minimally cared for by their mothers until age 3 and then are put out to fend for themselves. This separation is absolute. By age 3, they are expected to find their own food and shelter, and those that survive do provide for themselves. Children band into age sets for protection, since adults will steal a child's food whenever possible. No food sharing occurs within an age set. Groups of children will forage in agricultural fields, which scares off birds and baboons. This is often given as the reason for having children. Although little is known about how the Ik got to their present situation, there are some indications of former organizational patterns. They possess clan names, although today these have no structural significance. They live in villages, but these no longer have any political meaning. The traditional authority structure of family, lineage, and clan leaders has been progressively weakened. It appears that a former level of organization has simply been abandoned by the Ik as unprofitable and unsuitable in their present distress. Other cases that could be added to this list are the collapses of modern empires such as the Spanish, French, and British. The demise of these empires clearly represents a retrenchment from a multinational level of centralized organization that was global in extent. There are, however, differences from the majority of cases just discussed. Most notable is the fact that the loss of empire did not correspondingly entail collapse of the home administration. In this, the modern cases appear like the old Babylonian kingdom, where a short-lived empire was followed by a period of retrenchment with no end to Babylon itself. There are qualitative differences between ancient societies and modern ones in their susceptibility to collapse, although not for the reasons usually thought. This point will be addressed in the final chapter. After collapse. Popular writers and film producers have developed a consistent image of what life will be like after the collapse of industrialized society. With some variation, the picture that emerges is of a Hobbesian war of all against all, Ik conditions extended globally. Only the strong survive, the weak are victimized, robbed, and killed. There is fighting for food and fuel. Whatever central authority remains lacks the resources to reimpose order. Bands of pitiful, maimed survivors scavenge among the ruins of grandeur. Grass grows in the streets. There is no higher goal than survival. Anyone who has read modern disaster literature or seen it dramatized will recognize this script. It has contributed substantially to current apprehensions about collapse. Such a scenario, although clearly over-dramatized, does contain many elements that are verifiable in past collapses. Consider, for example, Casson's account of the withdrawal of Roman power from Britain. Quote, from AD 100 to 400, all Britain except in the north was as pleasant and peaceful a countryside as it is today. But by 500 AD, it had all vanished and the country had reverted to a condition which it had perhaps never seen before. There was no longer a trace of public safety, no houses of size, dwindling townships, and all the villas and most of the Roman cities burnt, abandoned, looted, and left the habitation of ghosts, unquote. Casson was not following poetic license, for he witnessed the breakdown of order in Istanbul after the disintegration of Turkish authority in 1918. Quote, the Allied troops found a city that was dead. The Turkish government had just ceased to function. The electrical supply had failed and was intermittent. Tramways did not work, and abandoned trams littered the roads. There was no railway service, no street cleaning, and a police force which had largely become bandit, living on blackmail from citizens in lieu of pay. Corpses lay at street corners and in side lanes. Dead horses were everywhere with no organization to remove them. Drains did not work and water was unsafe. All this was the result of only about 3 weeks' abandonment by the civil authorities of their duties. Based on the sketches of the preceding pages and an excellent summary by Colin Renfrew, the characteristics of society after collapse may be summarized as follows. There is, first and foremost, a breakdown of authority and central control. Prior to collapse, revolts and provincial breakaways signal the weakening of the center. Revenues to the government often decline. Foreign challengers become increasingly successful. With lower revenues, the military may become ineffective. The populace becomes more and more disaffected as the hierarchy seeks to mobilize resources to meet the challenge. With disintegration, central direction is no longer possible. The former political center undergoes a significant loss of prominence and power. It is often ransacked and may ultimately be abandoned. Small, petty states emerge in the formerly unified territory of which the previous capital may be won. Quite often, these contend for domination so that a period of perpetual conflict ensues. The umbrella of law and protection erected over the populace is eliminated. Lawlessness may prevail for a time, as in the Egyptian First Intermediate Period, but order will ultimately be restored. Monumental construction and publicly supported art largely cease to exist. Literacy may be lost entirely and otherwise decline so dramatically that a dark age follows. And I'll have more from Tainter tomorrow. I think I will put off talking about art rock until tomorrow as well. Love the horn, don't you? There was a piece in The Walrus, which is a Canadian magazine, which I suppose you could describe as political, cultural, or vice versa. I believe it's by the editor, a woman called Lisa Whittington Hill. It's called I'm Sick of Reboots and Rewatches, and You Should Be Too. We've all spent the pandemic in a pop culture feedback loop. For the love of God, make it stop. She begins, for the past 15 months, I avoided many things: sourdough starters, quarantinis, think pieces about the future of sweatpants. But the one trend I succumbed to was the pandemic playlist. To cope with all the loneliness and anxiety, people on social media were creating songs, and I accepted one friend's invitation to make my own list. Unlike other Spotify playlists I came across, like Coronavirus Beats to Not Panic To, has Coldplay, Hard Pass, and Work From Home, no Coldplay, thankfully, but so much Justin Bieber. Not one of the songs on my list had been released in the last 20 years. Bieber hadn't even been born when some of my picks were sent out into the world. And then she mentions some of the songs that she likes. On Fire by Sebadoh, a band that I like. Violet by Hole. Husker Du, No Promise Have I Made. I wasn't the only one who felt this way. In the early days of the pandemic, Spotify reported a 54% increase in nostalgia-themed playlists. The nostalgia evoked by pop culture from the past, be it TV, books, or Bennifer, has proven to be a popular coping mechanism. In a 2020 Nielsen survey, more than half of respondents said they rewatched episodes of a favorite show. It seems likely that these old favorites were one way of getting through the early stages of the pandemic. A higher percentage said that they had listened to music they used to listen to but hadn't heard in a while. Nostalgia acted as a support system, reminding us of a time when we were more easily connected to people, when we could travel, and when we wore pants with actual buttons. According to Nielsen, one of the most streamed shows of 2020 in the US was The Office. This popularity made sense as we searched for the security, community, and day-to-day routine that office life can provide, even if you have a boss like Michael Scott. Friends was also popular. Ross and Rachel were there for you, even when your own friends couldn't be. Spending hours rewatching Mad Men transported us back to the security of our pre-pandemic lives before we experienced Zoom fatigue and skipped the dishes commercials, completely ruined John Hamm. Actually, I think they're pretty funny myself. Rewatching also minimized the element of surprise at a time when the world was stressful enough. Well, again, I'll quote Fry from Futurama, that when Leela complains that something that was reacted to badly was both clever and a surprise, Fry, showing these, how would I say, these blasts of intelligence one wouldn't expect from him, said, clever things make people feel stupid and unexpected things make them feel scared. But back to our essayist. The time periods over history have been associated with greater nostalgia, tend to be times of great transition. Gossip Girl is mentioned. I do not believe the reboot of that was a success. Parks and Recreation, Saved by the Bell were resurrected. Okay. Saved by the Bell plays on a loop on MeTV on Saturday mornings. Virtual table reads. Come on. Virtual table reads? Seriously? In recent years, producers have tried to cash in on our obsession with retreading familiar ground by green-lighting reboots of everything from not-so-old hits like Dexter to the comparatively ancient The Jetsons, which that was on for like 2 or 3 years. It was not really a hit. My friends responded to the announcement of the reboot of Frasier, a show that last aired in 2004, with so much excitement that our group chat was all tossed salads and scrambled eggs. Okay. I wonder how that reboot is going to work. I mean, Martin Crane is dead, and everyone else is really old now. Are we still going to have his producer just be a tart and, oh, what unsuitable boyfriend are you with now, 60-year-old woman? They're not really going to do that, are they? So she concludes that she wants to see some new things now. I guess this was written with the idea that the pandemic was coming to an end. She concludes, it will take some time to see if a culture shift is in the cards, but there's one thing I do know for certain. I never want to hear The Office's theme song ever again. I've seen a lot of The Office. I thought it was a good show that went downhill. Downhill went really downhill, particularly after season 3 and particularly season 4. But Cheers, the characters on Cheers were supposed to be likable, and they were not likable. You see a lot of sitcoms like that. Mary Tyler Moore Show, another one. Seinfeld was a revolution, really, because no one was pretending that the characters on Seinfeld were likable. Nope, they were not. Of course, I'm talking about the American version, not the British version, which is short and sharp and superior overall. But let's look at the people here in this show. Michael Scott. Michael Scott is a terrible person. Michael Scott fake fired Pam twice. Michael Scott wastes everyone's time with these horrible meetings, which are largely about him and his own vanity. Michael Scott has a pitiable need to be loved, but he is not a lovable person. Nevertheless, in logic, which is typical of TV, he got 2 pretty attractive women to be a girlfriend. Actually, if you count his real estate agent, aka his actual real wife, that makes it up to 3. In the real world, Michael Scott would be beaten on a regular basis by enraged people, quite possibly once a month or perhaps even once a week. And Dunder Mifflin, the class action suit against it, because of the things that he says and does, typically, things that are racial or sexual or whatever, would bankrupt the company. Dwight Schrute, what can I say about him? He's crazy, okay? Primarily, that's the most important thing about him. Jim Halpert, he's supposed to be the voice of sanity, the one we all love. He's smug and rather feckless and a slacker, and nowhere near as funny or as intelligent as he thinks he is. Pam Beesly is one of my favorite cliches in drama, is what I call Ms. Frumpkowitz. That is to say, the woman takes off her glasses and lets down her hair, and the astonished man says, "Why, Miss Frumpkowitz, you're beautiful." Pam, not good dress sense, and she had a rather crummy, stringy hairdo, but obviously these are minor things. A very attractive woman. Leading on Jim Halpert the way she did for years was agonizing to watch. Of course, Jim Halpert put up with the proverbial friend zone. I get to do all the husband stuff with Pam, talking about her hopes, fears, dreams, all that, but you get to have sex with her. Well, I guess Roy did pretty well for himself. Ryan Howard, his character was amusing at the beginning, but it's all over the place. He became an exceedingly nasty person after he was promoted. This is not going to happen, okay? Famously, he never made a sale. Well, I used to be a salesman. I wasn't a very good salesman, but, I had salesmen working under me who were not even as good as I was. Everybody makes a sale. If you put in enough calls, you will make sales. It's just a question of how many. The idea that someone who tried to sell something which people need, like paper, didn't sell any, it's really pushing the credulity of the audience. Andy Bernard would be beaten on a daily basis or perhaps on an hourly basis and quite possibly beaten to death. I can see what they were doing with his character because Michael Scott was exceedingly obnoxious, and they decided to come up with a character even more obnoxious than Michael Scott. Andy Bernard getting promoted to be the boss again is absolutely preposterous. Yes, and he sang and played instruments and was just annoying in every possible way. You see something similar on Frasier. That Frasier Crane is he's supercilious, to put it in a word. And then they had the clever idea of making his brother Niles. Neither Frasier nor Niles are names that anyone would choose for their children. Of making him even more supercilious. Jan Levinson, I suppose there are some people in management who are as crazy as her. Stanley Hudson, for years I had no idea he was supposed to be a salesman. He was just surly, never looked up, worked on crossword puzzles all the time. What, he's a salesman? My father was a salesman. I worked with salesmen. I know what salesmen are like. They're not like Stanley Hudson. Kevin Malone, who worked in accounting, was borderline retarded. Now, this was a big shift in the show because right near the very beginning, we're told that he won like a $10,000 prize in a poker competition. And to be good at poker, you must be, good at various things, including math and psychology. And then later on, we find out he can't tell his right hand from his left and was supposed to be hired in the warehouse. But Michael Scott, for some reason, thought that it would be a good idea to put a really stupid person in accounting. Meredith Palmer is a drunk and obnoxious. Angela Martin is perhaps the worst person on the show. Oscar Martinez, I liked his character better when he was in the closet because these outbursts of petty rage against Michael Scott for wanting to give money to the Boy Scouts. It was funnier that way. Phyllis Vance, again, this woman is supposed to be a sales woman. Toby Flenderson's character was okay, but then it turns out that he had this big thing for Pam, and that he hated Jim Halpert as a result, and was constantly looking to sabotage. Yeah, and Pam's character herself, let's see, there's more. There's more there. Besides leading Jim on for all those years, there's this, she makes herself into the manager of the floor, which is a completely redundant job. They already have an HR rep. This is a company that has something like, 16 employees, and they have an HR rep. And then they hire someone else to do a job which is not necessary. Kelly Kapoor, I don't understand the fascination around Mindy Kaling. She is, to put it bluntly, not a good-looking woman. And in the show, constantly making false rape complaints against coworkers, constantly claiming, making outrageous lies to hurt people, or claiming that she was pregnant when she wasn't. Creed, played by Creed Bratton, was amusing, but of course it's years into the show before we learn what he actually is supposed to do, which is quality assurance. Erin Hannon, played by Ellie Kemper, she's a very good-looking woman. That's all I'll say about her. And then more characters have got increasingly ridiculous, like Catherine Tate's Nellie Bertram, or James Spader's Robert California. I didn't mention, let's see, someone else who worked. Daryl Philbin. I was rather pleased by his character at first, because he seemed like a likable character, and like everyone else, and he seemed to be getting smarter as the show went on. But then they decided, no, they were going to make him stupider. And he was clearly an ambitious man, and they decided for some reason that, no, they couldn't have that anymore, and we're just going to make him do a series of things which are just going to end any possibility he has of rising in management in the company. But I don't know, the appeal of this show, is it that people look at these characters and they think, well, I'm not as bad as those people? I think that's a large part of it, actually. I wonder what other people believe about this. And again, I just thought there was going to be an attempt. It looked like there was going to be an attempt at the beginning of the show to deal with straitened economic circumstances in the United States. But instead, the characters just got worse and worse and worse. If I were their boss, I would have fired almost every single one of them. Certainly Michael Scott. But no. I suppose a sitcom is not the place where one looks for reality. But this show seemed to go out of its way to show us situations that are just not going to happen. Fraser would offend liberals today, and the retired cop father was more likely to be correct and likable than his educated expert sons. Joe Ken 666 says the English Office much better. Well, again, except for the final episode, which pulls things together really well and indicates actual character growth on behalf of Ricky Gervais's character. There was never any, you weren't supposed to think of Ricky Gervais as a nice guy or a likable guy or someone you'd want to be friends with, because he was a narcissist maniac, and he was a very unpleasant person. Debrea says, why men appoint women at the top of the businesses they found and built? Isn't that kind of suicidal? Aaron says, I'd watch Fraser if it was on and someone else was watching it, but never turn it on myself. His character I mentioned before, the bits about radio in the show are ridiculous because I worked in radio, never mind that. But again, the engineer, or producer as she's called, even though she doesn't produce anything, there's no way that she would have been living in those accommodations. They earn almost nothing. But Fraser was such a cad with women. He's always complaining about not being able to find a woman, although during the course of the show, he goes out with a great many attractive women. But then he always sabotages the relationship it's seemingly on purpose. And a man in his situation with that voice of his, who's on the radio, and it's mostly female audience, and I'm listening, he says. Tell me about your problems. In real life, someone like Dr. Fraser Crane would be beating off the women with a stick. There would be so many of them. The combination of people who are on the media have groupies, and the fact of who he is and the nature of his media work, well, yeah, he would not have to worry about female companionship. Jules Roy says Fraser was the last sitcom I watched. Mad Men, the last American show I watched. These days, only European shows. I would like to watch some new sitcoms, but I don't know that I'm going to be watching many of them because they're all terrible, and they're all woke. They're all incredibly woke. And I don't know what one needs to put in a certain amount of effort into this sort of thing. I mean, if you look at Seinfeld, for instance, there was some promise in the first season, but you compare the first season to the second season, and it's like chalk and cheese. The first season, frankly, wasn't that good. And there was you could see a conscious attempt in the first season to make a more traditional kind of sitcom by making the characters more likable. One of the things I like most about Seinfeld is if you look at the one character who had the most advantages of the group, this was Elaine. Elaine is a quite good-looking woman, sexually attractive, educated, good dresser, conversationalist. She's the worst of the group. And the fact that she ends up with Putty is too funny. Ashiman Bravo says Ogun's Iron Dmitry Orlov also commented on the Great Reset project being pushed by globalist oligarchs amid the angle of the COVID story. Anron says the Liam Neeson full-blown AIDS bit is still the funniest thing Gervais has ever done. One of the funniest bits ever. Yes, it is one of the funniest bits ever done. Gervais has this trick where, there's certain things I can't say anymore, but I'm going to talk about it from the perspective of letting everyone know just how horrible this is, which invites the subject which wouldn't normally be talked about into the conversation. And you know that Gervais is really rejoicing in the ambiguity that he presents. Ogun's Iron says, how does Australia get away with its insane COVID policies? It turns out it's a very, very different country than I ever imagined. They've been lobotomized. The Right Honorable, I forget, was Fraser a centrist on the show or more of a conservative? He was a centrist liberal. I mean, he was a liberal, but he had this very strong feelings, for instance, about manners and politeness, and found that few people shared his views on manners and politeness. In fact, he was constantly being enraged by this. Of course, you could look at him as sort of a genteel Larry David from Curb Your Enthusiasm. Larry has very, very specific rules and cannot understand why the rest of the world does not follow his rules. Ashumain Bravo says author and writer Nicholas Baker, who has written for the New York Times and New Yorker, has been saying that, okay, I think I might review Nicholson Baker's book about World War II, which is really quite good. Okay, I'll talk about Art Rock tomorrow. Actually, I may talk more about TV because I just, I watch old TV. That's what I watch. I don't watch new TV. Well, I mean, I get free TV at the hotel, but it doesn't have those the channels that people want, right? And I'm not watching cooking shows or people remodeling their bathrooms or people who travel the world on yachts and, they're on yachts. It's like Love Island, and they're the worst people on earth, but they're on a yacht. That's different. Yeah, I may talk about old TV again tomorrow, because it's going to be kind of a nostalgia episode, I suppose. Hey, thanks for you all for tuning in. I will be back on the air tomorrow at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. Coming up later in the week, let's go to my profile page here. I'm going to be talking about a war classic from 1945, directed by John Ford and starring John Wayne. They Were Expendable, on Theater Thursday. And I'm going to be talking about a biography by Francis Wheen of Karl Marx on Friday on the book club, which is very well written indeed. And it's the best possible. I suppose it's the most sympathetic biography of Karl Marx that one could find. If you like the show or any part of it, I would appreciate it if you would click on the like button and subscribe to my YouTube channel if you have not done so already. I should mention RIP to Charlie Watts, obviously, whose drumming I've been listening to for well over 50 years with great enjoyment. So back tomorrow, 4 p.m., 7 p.m. I would appreciate donations to the live stream. Very much appreciated now, since I'm pretty much skint. My PayPal is linked to Kevin_Grace@hotmail.com. Once again, Kevin_Grace@hotmail.com. If you are in Canada, donations to the live stream may be made via Interac at kevingrace@shaw.ca. And as always, I leave you with this. In these days of social atomization and civilizational collapse, I do dearly wish that you, my dear viewers and listeners, manage to forge a genuine human connection in order to ease the burden. Good night.